The wrestling world loses an icon as Hulk Hogan passes away at the age of 71. Hey everyone, welcome into No Holds Barred. Rob Wong, joined as always by Postmedia wrestling writer Jan Murphy. And Jan, for wrestling fans, a difficult day on Thursday. Hulk Hogan, arguably the greatest professional wrestler of all time, passing away at the age of 71 after a cardiac arrest. That was reported by TMZ, of course. Still, no full details have really come out about what happened, but a tough day, like I said, for the wrestling world. Now, as you wrote about in the Toronto Sun, it is a complicated legacy for one Hulk Hogan, but I almost feel as though you need to sort of separate the character from the man. I think of, as other people have pointed out, Hulk Hogan was a larger-than-life personality. He was a hero to many people that were wrestling fans and maybe even some that weren't wrestling fans. But Terry Bollea, the person, did have some transgressions over his lifetime, made some choices that I think did not sit well with a lot of people. So what are your thoughts as we sit here today to talk about the life and legacy of Terry Bollea and Hulk Hogan?
Well, let me tell you, brother, for real, shocking yesterday to... I mean, I know there have been reports that he wasn't well, but everything coming out of his camp was that it was being played down. I've seen Bubba the Love Sponge has since, said he stuck with his story because he was the one that first put it out there that Hulk wasn't well and was on his deathbed. As I wrote in my column yesterday, I think you almost have to separate the man from the character to be able to sort of praise or put up or prop up the character, because the character was absolutely the most important wrestling character in the history. Without Hulk Hogan, we're probably not sitting here having this conversation today, where we have a show every week that focuses on professional wrestling. Hulk Hogan changed the industry. I mean, there were guys before him that were great. Andre the Giant was one of them. Ric Flair. There have been guys since, The Undertaker, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Roman Reigns, and there will be guys and girls, for future to come. But all of those are because of Hulk Hogan and what he and Vince McMahon, really, let's be honest, the two of them together were able to shut down the territories and turn WWE into the global empire that it became. And as I said yesterday in my column, and I've talked about it to a few other people privately, name another person who was the number one draw as a babyface and the number one draw as a heel in the history of pro wrestling. You won't find one. You just won't find one. He is in exclusive company when it comes to being the top guy in the business, both as a babyface and as a heel. And I mean, there have been others that have tried. They tried it with Stone Cold. They tried it with The Rock, just not to the same degree. Hogan was, the character was absolutely the most important and influential wrestling character in the history of the business, and no one will ever touch that, and no one can take that away from him. Terry Bollea, sure. I mean, we live in a cancel culture, Rob. I mean, we live in a time when this generation looks back at previous generations, and if you have done things that are terrible, horrible, I mean, a great example I saw yesterday in another piece was Sir John A. Macdonald, revered for the longest time, and now, as we've come to learn a little bit more about history and some other things have come to the forefront, we don't view him in the same token. And I don't think people will look at Terry Bollea / Hulk Hogan. Not everyone's going to agree. I saw lots of people out there yesterday who didn't want to see people praising Hulk Hogan. But for me, from a strictly wrestling standpoint, I think you have to separate what he did as Hulk Hogan, the character, and keep that away from what he did as the human being. I mean, I also wrote that Terry Bollea became Hulk Hogan because he did. I mean, everywhere he went, he was dressed like that. He was in character 24/7, 365, at least publicly. I mean, there will always be people out there who want to remind you of, the heinous things that Terry Bollea did. I mean, I'm not sure how heinous the sex tape was. It was unfortunate that it got put out, but it seems like it was consenting adults. And maybe not the smartest move by Hogan. Certainly tarnished his image. That was a big blow to the Hulk Hogan empire at the time. But the other stuff with the racism, and there's absolutely no excuse for that. That was terrible, horrible. And a religious man as Terry Bollea was, I'm sure now that he has crossed over, maybe he's paying for that sin. I don't know. I certainly know he paid for it, uh, you know, in the life that he had left, because it tarnished his image. For a while, he was removed from, all references of WWE, and it hurt his legacy. It hurt his income. It hurt just that whole mantra of Hogan. But again, I'm going to say it again. In wrestling, no one was more important, and no single person is more responsible for what we see today in WWE than Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, that is really undeniable when you talk about his impact and where he stands in professional wrestling. And when you think about, this current generation of WWE fans or AEW fans or wrestling fans in general, I mean, I would say maybe a lot of them don't really have a lot of memories of Hulk Hogan, because he was at his peak in the 80s and 90s. And by the time the early 2000s rolled around, of course, he came back, and we'll talk about that in a moment. His famous match against The Rock at WrestleMania 18 here in Toronto, that was kind of it. I know he went to, TNA and had a little bit of a run there, but by that time, I mean, I don't think anybody was, truly paying attention to what he was doing at a smaller promotion. So, when you talk about his legacy as a professional wrestler, I don't think people maybe, of a certain vintage, of a certain age these days really realize just how massive he was. Like, you can't talk about professional wrestling without talking about Hulk Hogan. As you said, he is sort of the one that, alongside Vince McMahon, built all of this to where it is today. In the WWE. So, if we're talking about the Mount Rushmore, I find it hard to not put him, on there first. You can talk about a Ric Flair, you can talk about an Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin. I think a lot of guys have a case to be on there, but as far as someone that is cemented as a face of professional wrestling, sports entertainment, there really is no other choice.
No, and I mean, you just sort of touched on it there. Like, I don't think today's generation, at least probably those under the age of 30 for sure, would really understand, because, again, Terry Bollea got Hulk Hogan in a lot of trouble, so there maybe hasn't been as much attention on him over the last 15 years. But 7 of the first 8 WrestleManias were headlined by Hulk Hogan. No one else can say that. No one else can say that. I'm not sure that anyone else will ever be able to say that. I mean, Undertaker had his 25, 24, 25, 26, whatever it ended up being, 28 WrestleManias in a row. Shawn Michaels sort of earned the moniker of Mr. WrestleMania for his great matches. Of course, Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, but 7 of the first 8 WrestleManias were headlined by Hulk Hogan. This man was on every magazine, every radio station, every talk show. He was in movies. Sylvester Stallone brought him, to be a bad guy in the Rocky franchise. Ultimate Warrior and Hogan in Toronto. As you mentioned, you touched on, I think we're going to talk about it, Rock Hogan in Toronto. Canada had 2 of the best, most important WrestleMania matches in history, both with Hogan. I just think, you will have to sort of do some digging if you're younger to figure out what this man's contributions to business were. But I mean, there was a time when he was as big, if not bigger than The Rock is right now. Maybe didn't find the Hollywood success that The Rock found outside of the Rocky movie, but Hogan was everywhere. I mean, he opened restaurants, he had, fitness equipment, he did everything. I mean, he was everywhere. He was pop culture for a long time. Like, he was going everywhere, like concerts. He was appearing at live events, across at other sporting events. I mean, he was a cash cow for WWE, and it just worked, right? I mean, people got him. They related to Hogan. He was the eat your vitamins, say your prayers, the wholesome, all-American guy, as I said in my column, beating the evil Russian Nikolai Volkov and the Iranian, the Iron Sheik, or the threat at home in Sergeant Slaughter. It was how campy it was back then, but it was huge, 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 huge. Sellouts everywhere.
Yeah, look, and it's a little bit different because we were up here in Canada, but I think if you were south of the border watching this all go down, as you mentioned, during all that those political things happening, it was sort of the embodiment of American, and really was a hero for a lot of people during that time, even though, as we know, it's not real. The professional wrestling industry is not a real thing. He's not actually beating someone from Iran, or beating up a Russian person that's representing that country. It's sports entertainment when it comes down to it. But it's pretty crazy to think about the impact that he had. You mentioned say your prayers and eat your vitamins. Hand up if you ever tried to rip off a T-shirt that you were wearing at any point. Like, these are the type of impacts that he had. So let's get to some of the top memories for us as wrestling fans watching Hulk Hogan. As you mentioned, the 2 matches in Toronto. I was too young to be there at WrestleMania 6. I was only 5-6 years old, so I did not attend. But you and I were both there. 2002, March 17th, WrestleMania X8, if you will. Rock and Hogan, Icon versus Icon. And for me, that was the only time I've ever seen the Hulk Hogan in a match in person. I was up in the 500 level. They were as tiny as ants, so it's incredible that I was even able to watch it and enjoy it. But the electricity in the crowd, I think, is what everybody talks about that night, because for people, if you're a current wrestling fan and you don't really know what happened back then, NWO, which was huge in the late 90s, and WCW, after they went out of business, they made their way into WWF at the time, and Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, they returned as the NWO, and I think shocked a lot of people that could not believe that these 3 guys that left WWF and went to WCW would ever be welcomed back. And that was the night that Hulk Hogan went from being a heel to being a face. A few nights later on Monday Night Raw in Montreal, got one of the biggest standing ovations in the history of wrestling. But Jan, it was really that Toronto crowd that turned things around for Hogan. I know The Rock has talked about it a lot, that they had to sort of, change things up mid-fly, because The Rock came in as the face, and then halfway through the match, the fans turned on him, and they had to sort of swap heel and face characters. But really a memorable night, and something that I'll never forget as a wrestling fan.
Yeah, I was. That was the first WrestleMania that I covered here with the Wig Standard in Kingston. I had been doing some some work covering wrestling, had a column, and managed to get myself accredited to cover it. And I think I didn't recognize that night what was happening up in the press box as much as maybe those people watching it at home who had the pleasure of hearing the commentary. And I've certainly years later been able to go back and look at it and realize what a masterpiece it was. But this, to me, is why WWE is still the number one company in the world, that they had the wherewithal while that match was happening to do that on the fly and recognize that a piece of, something historic was happening, and just went with it, right? Instead of sticking with the script, the guys recognized during the match that something was happening that they needed to flip the script. And that was such an important part of Hogan's history, of Rock's history, of WrestleMania history. I mean, it's often referred to as one of the 5 greatest moments in WrestleMania history, and one of the 5 best matches. I'm not sure it was a wrestling clinic by any stretch of the imagination, a 50-year-old Hulk Hogan. But Hogan was never a great wrestler. Maybe early in his career, he was better. But you talk about, just listening to you talk about that match, I mean, its impact, I think, is more understood now than it was at the time. The Hogan Warrior, certainly for me, I was younger, but at that time, it still had that real feel to me. I really thought Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior were going to fight. And, having a match in wrestling now, making it being able to feel it is difficult because we know it's scripted and we know the outcomes are predetermined. So when you go back and watch the older matches, it's hard to recapture that feeling you had. But Hogan could bring a crowd to its feet like few others. I was thinking about it yesterday, just some of the key moments. I wrote in my column, he was single-handedly responsible for the rise of WWE and almost single-handedly responsible for taking it down when he left and defected to WCW, and they almost took WWE out. So it's a fantastic career, and as you said, coming back and having this career-defining match with The Rock, sort of a passing of the torch, and The Rock ran with it after that. I think of that. I think of his heel turn and his arrival. Maybe one of the greatest 3 moments in wrestling history, and not a WWE moment. He went over and joined the NWO. Nobody saw that coming. Yeah, what a life, what a career.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm glad you mentioned the NWO because, as you said before, no one has ever done it where they were the top guy as a face and then the top guy as a heel. And, the NWO is one of those moments in wrestling where it branched out. It was bigger than wrestling. I can remember, friends of mine in school being all about the NWO that maybe didn't even watch wrestling, but you knew what it was. Everybody had the T-shirts. Everybody was doing the hand signs and all of that kind of stuff. And it doesn't happen without Hulk Hogan. Of course, if you're a certain vintage, you remember him body slamming Andre at WrestleMania.
Yeah,
that's
talk about that.
One of the biggest moments in wrestling history.
That's arguably the biggest moment. I mean, if you had to pick a moment that transcended that's it. That's a transcending moment. I mean, picking up Andre. Now, Andre had been picked up and slammed many times to that point in his life, and I think he talked about it at different times before he passed away. But when Hogan did it, it was heard around the world. I mean, it was a body slam. I mean, we've seen. It was a terrible match. Andre was at the end of his career. I mean, he still would wrestle for a bunch more years, but he was so banged up and hurt at that point. But he took that bump because they knew that was the moment, right? Hulk scooped up Andre, and that was the passing of the torch to Hogan, who, 20 years later or so, would pass that torch over to The Rock. Crazy. I mean, just sitting here reflecting. I mean, when I was a kid, my parents used to take us grocery shopping. We lived in Napanee, and there was a mall in Napanee, and they used to have a department store at the other end. So to get rid of us, so we wouldn't drive them nuts while they were trying to do groceries, they'd give us $10 and let us wander around the mall. And I would go right down to the Met store in search of those LJN rubber figures. And the first one I ever got was Hulk Hogan. Right? I mean, this guy, he really was and is. He is it. This is the biggest loss. This is Muhammad Ali. This is, DiMaggio. This is it. This is the biggest loss of, a legend in wrestling history. There is no bigger name.
Yeah.
The next one will be when we lose Steve Austin.
Yeah. Or I guess Vince McMahon would be maybe. Yeah. I mean, that's going to be a conversation as well.
Certainly on a different scale. Vince's contributions are unrivaled. He put his money where his mouth was. But yeah, I mean, from a talent standpoint, I mean, there's nobody bigger. I mean, we're going to lose Ric Flair at some point. Absolutely amazing wrestler and, huge name in the industry, but not even on the same scale. I mean, Flair said it himself yesterday. Not even comparable to Hogan.
Yeah, there is no one else that can compare to Hulk Hogan, as you said, passing away at the age of 71. But as we pointed out, a complicated legacy for Hulk Hogan, the character, and then the person, Terry Bollea. But let us know what you think in the comments section below. How will Hulk Hogan be remembered? As always, leave your thoughts. It is Rob Wong, Jan Murphy with you here on No Holds Barred, and we'll talk to you on the next one.